Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it. Then let's evaluate together. The sound wave was alive. A pulsing heart in Atlanta's Kirkwood neighborhood. Neon lights bled green and blue across the sweaty crowd, their glow catching on the murals that lined the walls. Bold strokes of black fists raised high, jazz legends blowing horns and words like freedom and soul sprayed in gold. The air was thick with the smell of fried chicken wings, sweet peach cobbler, and the sharp tang of whiskey from the bar. Bass from the speakers thumped like a second heartbeat, the kind that made your bones vibrate. It was a hot, sticky night, the kind where the city didn't sleep. It roared Ava. Brooks owned the stage. 28 with skin like polished mahogany and curls that spilled wild under the lights. She was a vision in a black silk dress that hugged every curve, slit high enough to tease. Her voice low and smoky wove through a spoken word piece laced with hip-hop beats, each word a blade cutting through the crowd's chatter. Mama's gone, left me her song, but Daddy's lost in the haze. She spat, her eyes fierce, scanning the room. Kirkwood's mine, my roots, my fire. Y'all try to take it, I'll blaze. The crowd erupted, hands up shouting her name like a prayer. But Ava's gaze locked on one man tucked in the VIP corner, his presence like a storm cloud in the neon glow. Elliot Kane, 34, CEO of Kane Media, sat with a whiskey glass dangling from his fingers, his tailored black suit sharp enough to cut glass. His eyes gray as a winter sky didn't waver from her, and damn if that didn't send a shiver down her spine. She knew who he was, Atlanta's golden boy, the man whose media empire was swallowing up black-owned studios like Coleman's Soul, her father's crumbling legacy. She'd been tracking his moves for weeks, digging into Kane Media's shady deals for her job as an investigative reporter at the Kirkwood Voice. Tonight, he was here to meet her father, Marvin Brooks, and Ava wasn't about to let him slide. She stepped off the stage, the crowd parting like a tide, her heels clicking on the sticky floor. The bass still thrummed, a new track kicking in heavy and raw. Ava stopped at the bar, inches from Elliot, her perfume vanilla and amber cutting through the whiskey haze. She leaned in just enough to let the neon catch the curve of her neck and smirked. "Enjoy the show, Kane." Her voice was velvet sharp at the edges. Elliot's lips twitched, a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. He set his glass down. The clink, swallowed by the music. "You sing like you're spilling secrets, Brooks," he said, his voice low, a rumble that hit her chest like the bass. "Got any about me?" She laughed, a sound like honey and fire. "Oh, I got plenty. Like how Kane Media's been sniffing around my daddy's studio thinking you can buy our soul with a check." She tilted her head, curls brushing her bare shoulder, daring him to bite. He didn't flinch, but his eyes darkened. A storm brewing. "You think I'm the bad guy? Maybe I'm just here to save what's left of Coleman's Soul." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear, sending a jolt through her. "Or maybe I just wanted to see you." Ava's pulse kicked up, but she held her ground, her smirk razor sharp. "Men like you don't save, Kane. You buy, and I ain't for sale." She turned to walk away, but his hand caught her wrist, firm but not rough, his skin hot against hers. The neon flickered, painting their faces in electric blue. "Dance with me," he said, not a question, his grip a challenge. She should have pulled away, should have told him to go to hell, but the bass was pounding. The crowd was a blur, and something in his eyes. Hunger maybe made her want to play his game. "You sure you can keep up?" she taunted, stepping into his space, her body brushing his. The DJ dropped a new beat, slow and dirty, the kind that made hips move before minds could catch up. Ava led him to the dance floor, the crowd swallowing them in a sea of bodies. She moved like she was born for it. Hips swaying, silk, dress clinging to her curves. Every step a dare. Elliot matched her, his hands finding her waist, fingers splaying wide heat, seeping through the thin fabric. The neon pulsed green to blue, catching the sweat on her collarbone, the flex of his jaw. Their bodies were close, too close, her chest grazing his, her breath hitching as his thigh pressed against hers. The music was a living thing, bass thumping in their veins, and for a moment it was just them, fire and ice, burning each other down. "Careful, Brooks," he murmured, his lips brushing her ear, voice rough. "You're playing with fire." She tilted her head back, meeting his gaze, her eyes blazing. "Good. I like it hot." Her fingers trailed up his chest, nails grazing his shirt, feeling the hard lines beneath. His grip tightened, a low growl in his throat, and damn if it didn't make her want to push him further. The neon flared, the crowd roared, and the world shrank to the heat between them. But the spell broke when a voice cut through the noise. "Ava." Her father Marvin stood at the edge of the dance floor, his frail frame leaning on a cane, his eyes heavy with worry. The music faded, reality crashing back. Ava stepped away, her skin still tingling where Elliot's hands had been. She shot him a look, half warning, half promise, and followed Marvin to the back room. The office was a stark contrast to the club's chaos, all peeling paint and stacks of unpaid bills. Marvin sank into a chair. His breathing labored, the weight of his heart condition etched in every line of his face. "We need to talk. Baby girl," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Ava crossed her arms, still buzzing from the dance, her guard up. "What's Kane doing here, Daddy? You know he's trying to buy the studio out from under us." Marvin's eyes dropped, guilt flickering Coleman souls, drowning Ava Bill's debts. "I can't keep it afloat. Kane's offering a way out." Her stomach twisted. "A way out? He's a vulture, Daddy. He'll tear this place down and build some shiny mall." "It ain't that simple," Marvin said, coughing, his hand trembling. "There's more. Sylvia's got a plan." Ava's jaw tightened at the mention of her stepmother. Sylvia Ward, a former soul dancer with a smile like a blade, had slithered into their lives after Ava's mother Lena died of cancer when Ava was 12. Sylvia never loved Marvin. She loved his legacy, his studio, his name, and she'd spent years making Ava feel like an outsider in her own home. "What's that snake cooking up now?" Ava asked, voice sharp. Before Marvin could answer, the door swung open and Sylvia strode in. Her red dress tight, her heels clicking like gunshots. Her braids were pulled high, her eyes cold as she fixed them on Ava. "Don't be dramatic, Ava," she said, her voice smooth but venomous. "We're saving your father's legacy, and you're gonna help." Ava laughed bitter. "Help? By letting Kane gut our studio." "Hard pass." Sylvia's smile didn't waver, but it was all teeth. "Not quite. Elliot Kane's agreed to invest in Coleman's soul enough to clear the debts. Keep your daddy breathing. But he wants something in return." She paused, savoring the moment. "You—" The word hit like a punch. Ava's breath caught her mind racing. "Me," she said, voice low. "Dangerous. What the hell does that mean?" "A marriage," Sylvia said, crossing her arms. "1 year on paper, you play the happy wife. Kane gets a clean public image, and we get his money. Simple." Ava's fists clenched, nails biting into her palms. "You're pimping me out for a studio." She turned to Marvin, her voice breaking. "Daddy, you're okay with this?" Marvin's head bowed, his silence louder than any words. "It's for the family, Ava," he mumbled, barely audible. For Lena's memory, the mention of her mother stung a knife twisting in her chest. Lena had built Coleman's soul with Marvin, poured her heart into every song, every note, and now they were using her name to chain Ava to a man like Elliot Kane. "You're selling me?" she said, her voice trembling with rage. "Both of you?" Sylvia stepped closer, her perfume sharp, cloying. "Don't act like a victim, Ava. You're a Brooks. You do what it takes. Or do you want to watch your daddy lose everything? His studio, his health, maybe his life?" The room spun, the weight of it crushing her. Ava wanted to scream, to tear the place apart, but Marvin's cough, weak and ragged, anchored her. She thought of her mother's voice, soft and fierce, singing her to sleep. Coleman's soul was Lena's legacy, and Ava couldn't let it die. "Not like this. Fine," she said, her voice, steel eyes burning into Sylvia's. "I'll play your game, but don't expect me to bow." She turned to Marvin, her heart cracking. "And you, I hope this is worth it." Sylvia's smile was triumphant, but Ava wasn't done. She stormed out back to the club where the music still pulsed. The neon still bled. Elliot was at the bar watching her like he'd been waiting. She stopped in front of him, close enough to feel his heat, her voice low. "You want me, Kane. You got me. But I'm not your prize. I'm your reckoning." His eyes flashed a mix of challenge and something deeper, something that made her pulse race. "We'll see, Brooks," he said, his voice a promise. "We'll see who burns first." She turned away, the bass swallowing her steps. Her heart. A war drum. Ava Brooks wasn't just signing a contract. She was starting a war. And Elliot Kane had no idea what he'd unleashed. Jada Miles, Ava's best friend and the club's resident hip-hop queen, caught her near the exit, her braids swinging as she grabbed Ava's arm. "Girl, what's up? You look like you're about to set this place on fire." Ava forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just made a deal with the devil, Jada. Pray I don't get burned." Jada's brow furrowed, but before she could push, Ava slipped into the night, the Atlanta skyline glittering like a promise and a threat. She'd play Elliot's game, but she'd play it her way, with fire, with soul, with everything she had. And if he thought he could control her, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Yo Soul Stories crew. Did Ava's hip-hop fire and Elliot's ice-cold vibe get you hyped? Atlanta's poppin', and this love's just sparking. Smash that subscribe button, drop your fave Kirkwood moment in the comments, and tell us where you're chillin'. Let's ride this wave together. The penthouse on Peachtree Street was a world away from Kirkwood's gritty pulse. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Atlanta's skyline, all twinkling lights and sharp edges like a city carved from diamonds. Inside, everything was cold, white, marble floors, black leather furniture, not a speck of dust or warmth. It was Elliot Kane's domain, a fortress of control, and Ava Brooks felt like a spark in a snowstorm just stepping through the door. She dropped her duffel bag on the polished floor, the thud echoing in the sterile space, her stuffed vinyl records, a worn leather jacket. A jar of her mama's old perfume looked out of place against the monochrome sleekness. Ava smirked, kicking off her boots and letting them scuff the pristine marble. If she was stuck here for a year playing wife to Atlanta's iciest CEO, she'd damn well make it her own. Elliot wasn't home when she moved in, which suited her fine. She'd signed the marriage contract that morning, her pen scratching out her name like a curse. 1 year. No strings, no emotions, just a business deal to save Coleman's soul studio from her father's debts. Sylvia's smug grin as Ava handed over the papers still burned in her mind, but Marvin's frail handshake, his whispered, "Thank you, baby girl," kept her from tearing it up. This was for him, for her mother's legacy, not for Elliot Kane. No matter how his touch had lit her up at the sound wave, Ava prowled the penthouse, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. She found a kitchen that looked like it had never seen a meal, all stainless steel and sharp angles. Grinning, she pulled a Tupperware of her auntie's mac and cheese from her bag, popped it in the microwave and ate it straight from the container, perched on Elliot's pristine black sofa. Crumbs scattered like tiny rebellions. She cranked her portable speaker, outcasts so fresh, so clean, blasting through the silence, the bass rattling the windows. Let him come home to this. When Elliot walked in at midnight, he froze in the doorway, his suit still flawless despite the late hour. His gray eyes swept over the scene. Ava sprawled on his sofa legs, up a smear of cheese sauce on her chin. Hip-hop shaking the walls. "What the hell are you doing?" he said, his voice low, clipped like he was holding back a storm. Ava licked her spoon, slow and deliberate, her eyes locked on his. "Making myself at home. Husband." She stretched her tank top, riding up to show a sliver of her stomach, and watched his gaze flicker just for a second. "You got a problem with that?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he crossed to the speaker, yanked the plug, and the music died with a whine. The silence was deafening heavy with the tension between them. "This isn't a game, Brooks," he said, turning to face her, his shadow long under the cold LED lights. "There are rules. No mess, no noise, no soul." She cut in, standing her bare feet, slapping the marble as she closed the distance. She stopped inches from him, close enough to catch the faint cedar of his cologne, to see the pulse tick in his neck. "You think you can lock me in this ice box and I'll play nice? Nah, Kane, I'm here and I'm loud." His eyes narrowed, but there was something else there, heat buried deep like embers under ash. "You signed the contract," he said, voice rougher now. "You live by my terms." She laughed, a sharp, defiant sound. "Your terms, baby. I'm rewriting the whole damn book." She stepped closer, her chest brushing his, her breath warm against his jaw. "You wanted me. You got me. But don't cry when I burn this place down." For a moment, he didn't move, his eyes searching hers like he was trying to crack a code. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell, his voice cold again. "Stay out of my way, Ava, and clean up your mess." He turned, heading for the hallway, but her voice stopped him. "Scared, Kane?" She called, her tone teasing, daring. "Scared? You might like the heat." He didn't turn around, but his shoulders tensed and she knew she'd hit a nerve. The door to his bedroom clicked shut, leaving her alone in the vast empty space, her heart pounding like a drum. Game on the next week was a war of attrition. Ava turned the penthouse into her battlefield, leaving sweet tea stains on the counter, blasting Megan Thee Stallion at dawn, and borrowing one of Elliot's crisp white dress shirts to wear as a sleep shirt, the hem barely covering her thighs. She caught him staring once his coffee cup froze in midair, his eyes tracing the curve of her legs under the soft fabric. "See something you like?" She'd teased, sauntering past her hips, swaying just enough to mess with him. He'd looked away, but not fast enough. By day, Ava dug into Kane Media, her reporter instincts on overdrive. She met Jada Miles at a Kirkwood diner, the air thick with the smell of fried catfish and cornbread. Jada, her braids tied back, slid a USB drive across the table, her eyes gleaming. "Got something for you, girl," she said, popping her gum. Emails from Kane Media's servers. Shady deals. Backroom talks. "Your boy's company's been buying up black studios for years and it ain't clean." Ava plugged the drive into her laptop, her pulse racing as she scanned the files. Payments to city officials, forged permits, and her breath caught a contract from 20 years ago, signed by Marvin Brooks, selling half of Coleman's Soul Studio to Victor Kane, Elliot's father. The terms were brutal, designed to bleed Marvin dry. "This is why Daddy's been drowning," she whispered, her stomach twisting. Victor set him up. Jada leaned forward, her voice low. "You think Elliot knows?" Ava's jaw clenched. If he does, he's as dirty as his dad. If he doesn't, he's still a Cain. She shut the laptop, her mind spinning. She needed answers, and she wasn't waiting for permission. That night, she found Elliot on the penthouse rooftop, a private deck with a view that stretched to the horizon. The Atlanta skyline glittered below, but the moon was the real star, full and silver, casting shadows across the concrete. Elliot stood by the railing, a glass of bourbon in his hand. His tie loosened the top button of his shirt undone. For once, he looked human, not like a machine in a suit. Ava stepped out her silk dress, catching the breeze, the fabric whispering against her skin. The wind carried the faint hum of the city car horns, distant music, the pulse of Kirkwood below. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Tell me about your father," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the quiet. Elliot turned his eyes, narrowing, the bourbon glass glinting under the moonlight. "What's this about Ava?" She crossed her arms, the moonlight painting her skin in silver, her curls swaying in the wind. "Victor Kane. He screwed my dad over, 20 years ago, bled Coleman's soul dry. You know about it, don't you?" Her voice trembled, not with fear but with rage, the kind that could burn cities. Elliot's face hardened, but he didn't deny it. "That was before my time," he said, his voice low, controlled. "Victor's deals aren't mine." "Bullshit," she snapped, stepping closer, her heels clicking on the concrete. "You're his son. His blood runs in you. You expect me to believe you didn't know?" She was in his space now, close enough to see the flicker of something. Guilt, maybe in his eyes, to feel the heat radiating off him. He set the glass down, the clink sharp in the night air. "I'm not my father, Ava," he said, his voice rougher now, like gravel. "I didn't know the details, but yeah, I knew he played dirty. That's why I'm trying to clean it up." "Clean it up?" She laughed bitter, her hands balling into fists. "By marrying me, by buying my family's legacy. You're just another Cain. Elliot wrapping your poison in a pretty suit." His eyes flashed, and before she could move, he closed the distance, his hands gripping her arms, not hard, but firm enough to stop her. The moonlight caught the sweat on his brow, the sharp line of his jaw. "You think I wanted this?" He growled, his breath hot against her cheek. "This marriage, this deal, I did it to keep your father's studio alive, to keep you from losing everything." Her heart pounded, his words slicing through her anger, but she wasn't ready to yield. "Prove it," she hissed, her lips inches from his, her voice a dare. "Prove you're not him." The air crackled, the wind whipping her dress against her legs, the city humming below. Elliot's grip tightened, his eyes burning into hers, and for a moment she thought he'd walk away. But then he moved fast, one hand sliding to her waist, the other cupping her neck, pulling her into him. His lips crashed against hers, a kiss that was all fire and hunger. No hesitation, no control. Ava gasped, the taste of bourbon and him flooding her senses, her hands fisting his shirt, pulling him closer. The moonlight bathed them in silver, the wind roaring in her ears, her skin electric where his fingers pressed through the silk. His tongue teased hers, a low groan vibrating in his chest, and she answered with a moan, her nails scraping his neck, the heat between them, a living thing. But the truth, the contract. Victor, her father, slammed back into her like a cold wave. She pushed him away, her breath ragged, her lips tingling. "That's not proof," she said, her voice shaking but her eyes fierce. "That's just you trying to win." Elliot stared at her, his chest heaving, his eyes dark with something raw, unguarded. "You're wrong, Ava," he said, his voice low, almost broken. "But I'll show you. Whatever it takes." She turned, the wind catching her curls, her heart a war zone. "You better." She threw over her shoulder, stepping back into the penthouse, the moonlight fading behind her. She didn't look back, but she felt his gaze heavy and burning long after the door closed. The next morning, Ava met Jada at a Kirkwood coffee shop, the air thick with the smell of roasted beans and cinnamon rolls. Jada slid a new file across the table, her eyes worried. "More dirt on Kane Media," she said, keeping her voice low. "Victor's been meeting with Sylvia. They're planning something big. Ava bigger than the studio. Bigger." Ava's stomach dropped, the memory of Elliot's kiss still searing her lips. She opened the file, her eyes scanning emails between Victor and Sylvia, cryptic but damning. Plans to buy out half of Kirkwood's black-owned businesses with Coleman's soul as the crown jewel, and a name kept popping up. "Elliot Kane's son of a bitch," Ava whispered, her hands shaking. Was he playing her? Was that kiss just another move in his game? She thought of his eyes on the rooftop, the way he'd held her like she was the only thing that mattered. But Kane's didn't love. They conquered. Jada grabbed her hand, her grip fierce. "You gotta be careful, girl. Elliot's smooth, but he's still a Kane. Don't let him get in your head." Too late. Ava muttered, her voice bitter, but she wasn't done. If Elliot was lying, she'd bury him. If he wasn't, well, she'd figure that out when she got there. For now, she had a war to fight, and Kirkwood's soul was on the line. She stood the file tucked under her arm, her resolve hardening. Ava Brooks didn't just survive, she burned. And if Elliot Kane thought he could play her, he was about to get scorched. West Oakland was a different beast from Atlanta's Kirkwood. The air here crackled with defiance, like the city itself was ready to throw a punch. Murals of Black Panther heroes and funk legends splashed across brick walls, their colors vivid even under the sodium glow of streetlights. The scent of BBQ ribs and collard greens wafted from food trucks, mixing with the faint tang of spray paint from late-night graffiti artists. At night, the streets pulsed with the low, gritty thump of funk music, the kind that sank into your bones and made you move before you could think. This was a place that didn't just survive, it roared. Ava Brooks felt it the moment she stepped off the plane, her leather jacket slung over one shoulder, her curls catching the California breeze. She and Elliot Kane had been sent to Oakland by Kane Media to oversee a new project, a glossy music hub that threatened to bulldoze half of West Oakland's black-owned studios, including a historic funk spot called the Groove Haven. Ava knew the deal was rotten, another Kane scheme to gentrify a community's soul, and she was here to dig up dirt. But after the rooftop kiss in Atlanta, the fire between her and Elliot was a complication she hadn't planned for. His lips, his hands, the way he'd growled her name. They haunted her even as she swore she'd never trust a Kane. The house they were staying in was a funky old Victorian in West Oakland, all creaky wood floors and stained glass windows. A far cry from Elliot's sterile penthouse. Ava claimed the attic room, its slanted ceiling painted with a mural of Sly Stone mid-performance, his afro a halo under stage lights. She unpacked her vinyls, Parliament Funkadelic Bootsy Collins stacking them beside a turntable she'd found in the corner. If she was stuck playing wife, she'd do it loud. Elliot kept his distance, working from a makeshift office downstairs, his suit jacket slung over a chair, his sleeves rolled up to show forearms that Ava tried not to notice. They moved around each other like magnets, drawn close, then repelling every glance charged with the memory of that kiss. She caught him watching her once as she danced to flashlight in the living room, her hips swaying, her silk skirt swirling. His eyes darkened, but he turned away, slamming his laptop shut. Good. Let him squirm. Ava's investigation kicked into high gear when she met Lila Carter, a graffiti artist with a buzz cut and a chip on her shoulder. Lila's family had lost their home to a Kane Media project a decade ago, and she wasn't shy about her hatred for the company. They met at the Groove Haven, a dive bar turned funk club, its walls plastered with posters of Rick James and George Clinton. The air was thick with weed and sweat, the stage lit by a single red bulb that cast everything in a sultry glow. Lila slid Ava a folder of old contracts, her voice low over the thump of a live band. "Check this out, sis. Kane Media's been screwing over black artists since the 90s. Your dad's studio. Just one of many." Ava flipped through the pages, her heart sinking. There it was, a contract from 1998, signed by her father, Marvin Brooks, handing over distribution rights for Coleman's Soul Studio to Victor Kane Elliott's father. But another name jumped out. Sylvia Ward, listed as the broker. Sylvia, her stepmother. The woman who'd pushed Ava into this marriage had been working with Victor all along, betraying Marvin for a cut of the profits. Ava's hands shook rage, boiling in her chest. Sylvia hadn't just married her father for his name, she'd sold him out for cash. "Lila, you're a lifesaver," Ava said, tucking the folder under her arm. "This is gonna bury them." Lila's eyes softened, but her voice was hard. "Be careful. Ava Kane's don't play fair, and Sylvia's a snake. You need backup." "I'm here." Ava nodded, her mind racing. She needed to confront Elliot to know if he was part of this betrayal. But the thought of facing him, of standing close enough to feel his heat again, made her stomach twist. She wasn't sure if she wanted to slap him or kiss him or both. That night, the Groove Haven was packed the crowd a sea of afros, braids, and leather jackets, all moving to a funk band that shook the walls. Red lights pulsed, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Ava wore a silk crop top and high-waisted jeans, her skin glowing under the haze, her curls loose and wild. She spotted Elliot by the bar. His usual suit traded for a black button-down. Sleeves rolled up, a beer in his hand. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man who could break hearts without trying. "Damn him!" She weaved through the crowd, the bass vibrating in her chest, until she was close enough to catch his cedar cologne. "We need to talk," she said, her voice cutting through the music, sharp and unyielding. Elliot's eyes met hers, a storm brewing in their gray depths. "Here," he said, nodding at the chaos around them. "Not exactly private." "Then make it private," she shot back, her jaw tight. "Unless you're scared of what I've got to say." His lips twitched, a flicker of amusement, but he nodded, leading her through a side door to a small recording studio tucked behind the stage. The room was a cocoon of soundproof walls. The only light, a red bulb that bathed everything in a crimson glow. A mixing board sat in one corner, a microphone stand in another, the air heavy with the faint hum of speakers. The door clicked shut, muffling the band's funk to a low throb like a heartbeat. Ava didn't waste time. "Sylvia sold out my dad," she said, slamming the folder onto the mixing board. Papers spilling. "She brokered the deal with your father, Victor, to bleed Coleman's soul. Dry. And you're gonna tell me you didn't know?" Elliot's face was unreadable, but his eyes flickered to the papers, then back to her. "I didn't know about Sylvia," he said, his voice low, steady. "Victor's deals were before I took over. I told you, I'm not him." "Bullshit," she snapped, stepping closer, her voice trembling with fury. "You're a Kane. You knew something, didn't you? You let Sylvia push me into this marriage, let her play me like a pawn," her hands balled into fists, her nails biting her palms, the red light glinting off her skin like fire. Elliot's jaw clenched, his calm cracking. "I didn't know the details. Ava," he said, his voice rougher now, raw. "I knew Victor screwed people over. But not your dad. Not like this. I signed the marriage deal to save your studio, not to trap you." "Save it," she laughed, bitter, her eyes blazing. "You think I believe that? You're just another suit, Elliot playing God with my life." The air between them crackled, the bass from the club seeping through the walls. A low, primal pulse. Elliot stepped forward, closing the gap, his breath hot against her face. You want to hate me, Ava? Fine. But don't lie to yourself. You feel this too. His hand grazed her arm, fingers trailing fire, and her breath hitched, betraying her. Don't, she warned. But her voice was softer, less certain, her body leaning into his touch despite herself. The red light bathed them, her crop top clinging to her curves, sweat glistening on her collarbone. She hated him, hated the way he made her pulse race, but her skin was alive where his fingers lingered. Then stop me, he murmured, his voice a low growl. His eyes locked on hers, but she didn't. Instead, she grabbed his shirt, yanking him closer, her lips crashing against his in a kiss that was all heat and hunger. The bass throbbed through the floor, syncing with their heartbeats, the red light pulsing like a flame. His hands slid to her hips, gripping hard, the denim ruff under his palms. Ava moaned, her nails scraping his neck, her body arching into his as his tongue teased hers, a dance as fierce as the one they'd shared in Atlanta. The air was thick, the hum of the speakers vibrating in her chest. His breath ragged against her lips. She wanted to lose herself in it, in him. But Sylvia's name flashed in her mind like a warning. She pushed him back, her chest heaving, her lips swollen. This doesn't change anything, she said, her voice shaking, but her eyes fierce. You're still a Cain, and I don't trust you. Elliot stared at her, his breath uneven, his hands still hovering where her hips had been. You will, he said, his voice low, a promise that sent a shiver down her spine. I'll prove it. Ava, whatever it takes. She turned, storming out of the studio, the red light fading behind her, the funk band's rhythm swallowing her steps. But her lips burned, her skin ached, and the truth was a knot in her chest. Elliot Cain was dangerous not just to her father's legacy, but to her heart, and that scared her more than any contract. The next morning, Ava met Lila at a West Oakland mural site, the air sharp with spray paint and the distant clang of a BART train. Lila was finishing a piece, a black woman with a crown of stars, her eyes fierce. Found more for you, Lila said, handing Ava a USB drive. Emails between Sylvia and Victor, recent ones. They're planning to flip the Groove Haven next. Ava's stomach twisted as she plugged the drive into her phone, scanning the files. The emails were cryptic, but one line stood out. Elliot's asking questions. Keep him in line or we cut him out. Her heart sank. Was Elliot digging into his father's deals, or was he playing both sides? The kiss in the studio, the way he'd held her, was it real, or just another Cain lie? Lila watched her, her spray can hissing as she added a star to the mural. You okay, Ava? You look like you're carrying the world. Ava forced a smile, but it was brittle, just figuring out who to trust. She said, pocketing the drive, and who to burn? Lila nodded, her eyes hard. Trust yourself first, sis. The rest will show their colors. Ava walked away, the mural's stars burning into her mind, her resolve hardening. Sylvia and Victor were playing a game, and Elliot was either a player or a pawn. Either way, she'd find out, and when she did, she'd bring the fire hot enough to burn them all. West Oakland's pulse slowed as autumn crept in the air, turning crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant bonfires. The Victorian house where Ava Brooks and Elliot Cain were staying felt heavier now, its creaky wood floors and stained glass windows no longer a quirky refuge, but a cage. The murals outside Black Panther fists, funk legends, and glittering afros stood defiant under gray skies, but inside Ava was unraveling. The truth about Sylvia Ward's betrayal, her role as Victor Cain's broker in screwing over her father's studio, burned in Ava's chest like a coal, and Elliot, his kiss in the funk studio, still seared her lips, But the emails mentioning his name, tying him to Sylvia and Victor's plans, made her question everything. Was he her ally or her enemy? Her heart screamed. One thing, her head another, and the war between them was tearing her apart. Ava spent her days digging deeper, meeting Lila Carter at graffiti sites and funk dives, piecing together Sylvia's endgame. Lila's USB drive had been a goldmine, emails showing Sylvia and Victor planning to flip West Oakland's black-owned studios with Coleman's Soul Studio as the prize. But the latest bombshell was a meeting scheduled in Oakland. Sylvia and Victor plotting their next move. Ava's hands shook as she read the details. Her coffee going cold at a West Oakland diner, the smell of fried okra and cornbread barely registering. "They're meeting tomorrow," she told Lila, her voice low, fierce. "I'm crashing it." Lila, her buzz cut, catching the diner's neon glow, frowned. "You sure about this?" "Ava. Sylvia's ruthless and Victor's worse. You need backup." Ava's jaw tightened, her curls bouncing as she shook her head. "I can handle them. This is personal." But the truth was she wasn't sure she could handle Elliot. His name in those emails, Elliot's asking questions. Keep him in line haunted her. She'd pushed him away after the studio kiss, but the memory of his hands, his breath kept her awake at night. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Back at the Victorian. Ava avoided Elliot slipping in late, her boots silent on the wood floors. The house was dark. The only light a faint glow from the living room fireplace, its crackle cutting through the silence. She paused, catching Elliot's silhouette by the hearth, his shirt unbuttoned halfway, a glass of bourbon dangling from his fingers. He looked tired, human, not the cold CEO she'd sparred with in Atlanta. Her heart twisted, but she shoved it down, heading for the stairs. "Ava," he called, his voice low, rough, stopping her cold. "We need to talk." She turned her silk skirt, catching the firelight shadows dancing across her skin. "Talk," she said, her voice sharp, laced with pain. "You mean lie. I'm done with your games, Kane." He stood, setting the glass on the mantel, the fire casting his face in sharp relief, jaw tight, eyes stormy. "I'm not playing games," he said, stepping closer, his boots heavy on the floor. "You've been dodging me since the studio. Tell me what's going on." Her laugh was bitter, echoing in the quiet house. "What's going on? Your dad and Sylvia are tearing my family apart, and your name's all over their plans. You tell me what's going on." "Elliot." She stepped into his space, her chest heaving, the firelight glinting off her curls, her eyes blazing. His face darkened, but he didn't back down. "My name." "What the hell are you talking about? Don't play dumb." She snapped, her voice breaking emails. "Elliot, you're tied to their scheme to buy out Kirkwood. Oakland everything. You knew, didn't you?" Her hands trembled, but she held his gaze, daring him to lie. For a moment he was silent, the fire's crackle filling the space, the air thick with tension. Then he spoke, his voice low, raw. "I didn't know about Sylvia's deal with Victor. I swear it. Ava, I've been digging into my father's files, trying to figure out what he's hiding. If my name's in those emails, it's because I'm asking questions, not because I'm part of it." She wanted to believe him, wanted it so bad it hurt. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Prove it," she said, her voice a whisper, a challenge. "Or we're done." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney, the glow painting them in gold and shadow. Elliot's eyes searched hers, and then he moved fast, one hand cupping her face, the other sliding to her waist, pulling her against him. "I'm not losing you," he growled, his lips crashing into hers, a kiss that was all desperation and heat. The firelight danced across her skin, her silk skirt clinging to her thighs, his fingers hot through the fabric. Ava moaned, her hands fisting his shirt nails, scraping his chest, the taste of bourbon and him drowning her senses. His tongue teased hers, a low groan rumbling in his throat, and she pressed closer, her body aching, the crackle of the fire sinking with their ragged breaths. His hand slid lower, gripping her hip, the silk slick under his palm, and she gasped, her head tilting back as his lips trailed to her neck, leaving a burning path. But Sylvia's betrayal, the emails, her father's fading health, they slammed into her like a cold wind. She pushed him away, her chest heaving, her lips swollen. "This doesn't fix anything," she said, her voice shaking, tears stinging her eyes. "You can't kiss away the truth, Elliot." He stared at her, his breath uneven, his hands still reaching for her. "I'm not trying to," he said, his voice raw. "I'm trying to fight for you. Let me help Ava, please." She shook her head, backing away, the fire's warmth fading. "I fight my own battles," she said, turning for the stairs, her heart a wreck. The door to her room clicked shut, but sleep didn't come. The fire's crackle echoed in her mind, and so did Elliot's touch, his promise. She was falling, and she didn't know if she'd land or crash. The call came at dawn, shattering the fragile quiet. Ava was in the attic, her phone buzzing on the turntable, Marvin's name flashing. She answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Daddy." But it wasn't Marvin. A nurse's voice, calm but heavy, cut through the fog. "Ms. Brooks. I'm sorry. Your father had a heart attack last night. He didn't make it." The world stopped. Ava's phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Marvin was gone. Her father, the man who'd built Coleman's soul studio with her mother, who'd sung her to sleep with Sam Cooke records, who'd let Sylvia cage her in this marriage. He was gone. The grief hit like a tidal wave, drowning her, leaving her gasping. She sank to her knees, her sobs silent, her hands clutching the vinyl of her mother's favorite album. Lena's voice trapped in the grooves. Elliot found her there, his knock unanswered, his face pale as he pushed open the door. "Ava," he said, his voice soft, urgent, kneeling beside her. "Jada called me. I'm so sorry." She didn't look at him, her eyes fixed on the vinyl, her voice a broken whisper. "He's gone, Elliot. Everything's gone." The words cracked, and the tears came hot and unstoppable, her shoulders shaking. He reached for her hesitant, then pulled her into his arms, his shirt absorbing her tears. "You're not alone," he murmured, his hand stroking her curls, his warmth a lifeline. "I'm here, Ava, I'm here." She let him hold her, too broken to fight, but the comfort was fleeting. Sylvia's voice echoed in her mind, her betrayal, a fresh wound. Ava pulled back, wiping her eyes, her resolve hardening. "I need to go home," she said, her voice steady now, cold. "I need to bury my father, and I need to end this." Elliot's face tightened, but he nodded. "Let me come with you, please." She didn't answer, just stood grabbing her jacket, her heart a fortress. Marvin was gone, and Sylvia had blood on her hands. Ava wasn't just fighting for the studio now, she was fighting for her family's soul. The funeral was a blur held in Atlanta's Kirkwood. The church packed with musicians, neighbors, and ghosts. Ava stood by the casket, her black dress stark against her skin, her curls pinned tight, her eyes dry but hollow. Jada held her hand, her presence a quiet strength, while Lila, fresh from Oakland, stood in the back, her graffiti-covered jacket a silent vow of support. Elliot was there too, in a dark suit, his eyes never leaving Ava, but she didn't acknowledge him. Not yet. Sylvia swept in like a queen, her red lipstick a slash against her morning black, her tears as fake as her smile. After the service, she cornered Ava in the church hall, the smell of fried chicken and sweet tea from the repast heavy in the air. "I'm so sorry, Ava," Sylvia said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But we need to talk about the studio." Ava's blood ran cold. "Talk," she said, her voice low, dangerous. "My father's not even cold, and you're already scheming." Sylvia's smile didn't waver. "Marvin left Coleman's soul to me," she said, pulling out a document, her nails gleaming. "His signature right here. It's mine now, Ava. You're out." The room spun, the chatter of mourners fading to a dull roar. Ava snatched the paper, her eyes scanning the signature. Marvin's, but shaky wrong. "This is fake," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You forged it, didn't you? You cored my father's life, and now you're stealing his legacy." Sylvia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Prove it, little girl. You're nothing without Marvin, and you're nothing to me." She turned, her heels clicking, leaving Ava shaking the document, crumpling in her fist. Jada grabbed her arm, her eyes fierce. "She's lying, Ava. We'll fight this. You hear me?" Ava nodded, but her gaze drifted to Elliot standing across the hall, his face unreadable. She'd seen him talking to Sylvia earlier, a quiet exchange that set her nerves on edge. Was he in on this? Had he played her all along? The studio kiss, the rooftop, the firelight, were they just lies to keep her in line? She stormed over, her voice a blade. "Did you know?" she demanded, stopping inches from him, her breath ragged. "Did you know Sylvia was gonna pull this?" Elliot's eyes widened, genuine shock flickering. "Know what, Ava? What's happening?" "Don't lie to me," she shouted, her voice cracking, drawing eyes from the crowd. "Sylvia's got the studio, says Marvin signed it over. I saw you with her, Elliot. Tell me you're not part of this." His jaw clenched, his hands balling into fists. "I'm not," he said, his voice low, fierce. "I swear. Ava, I was asking Sylvia about Victor, trying to get answers." "I'm on your side." She wanted to believe him, but the pain was too raw, the betrayal too fresh. "My side?" she said, her voice breaking. "I don't even know what that means anymore." She turned, pushing through the crowd, Jada and Lila trailing her. Her heart a pile of ashes. Back in Oakland, Ava locked herself in the attic, the mural of Sly Stone staring down like a judge. She pored over Lila's USB drive, Jada by her side, the two of them fueled by coffee and rage. The emails confirmed Sylvia's forgery, but they needed more hard proof to take her down, and Victor the puppet master was still out there pulling strings. Ava's phone buzzed, Elliot's name flashing. She ignored it, but his texts kept coming. "Let me help. I'm not giving up on you." She tossed the phone aside, her chest tight. She couldn't trust him, not yet, not when everything was crumbling. But as she stared at her mother's vinyl, Lena's voice whispering in her memory, Ava knew one thing: she wasn't done. Sylvia had taken her father, her studio, her trust, but Ava Brooks was a fighter forged in Kirkwood's fire, and she'd rise from these ashes, even if it meant burning everything down. U Street in Washington, D.C. was a living legend, the Black Broadway where go-go music was born and jazz never died. The corridor buzzed with life, neon signs flashing over jazz clubs, murals of Duke Ellington and Chuck Brown glowing under streetlights. The air thick with the smell of mambo sauce and fried fish from carryouts. Drummers on corners beat out go-go rhythms, their congas and cowbells a heartbeat that pulled you in, made you move. It was a place where history and rebellion collided, and Ava Brooks felt it in her bones as she stepped onto the pavement. Her leather jacket slung over a silk dress, her curls bouncing under the city's glow. She was here for a fight, one that could save her father's legacy or bury it for good. The grief of Marvin's death still clung to her, heavy as wet ash. But Sylvia Ward's betrayal had lit a fire in her gut, Sylvia's forged document claiming Coleman's Soul Studio was a knife in Ava's heart, and the suspicion that Elliot Kane was part of it had nearly broken her. She'd pushed him away in Oakland, her trust shattered by emails tying his name to Sylvia and Victor's schemes. But the memory of his arms around her, his voice promising to fight for her, lingered like a song she couldn't shake. Ava was done running. Washington, D.C. was her last stand, and she'd either rise or burn. She'd come for the National Music Summit, a glitzy conference where industry bigwigs and artists mingled, the perfect stage to expose Sylvia's lies. Lila Carter and Jada Miles had flown in from Oakland and Atlanta, their presence a lifeline. Lila had dug up more emails, and Jada had called in a favor from a D.C. contact. Rico Torres, a go-go producer with a reputation for fighting gentrification. Rico met them at a U Street jazz club, Bohemian Caverns, its cave-like walls pulsing with history. The air was warm, scented with bourbon and candle wax, the stage lit by a soft amber glow. Rico, his dreads tied back, slid Ava. A flash drive, his voice low over a sax solo. "This is it, Ava." Video of Sylvia and Victor Kane caught on a studio camera talking about the forgery. "It's your smoking gun." Ava's heart raced as she plugged the drive into her tablet, the grainy footage showing Sylvia in a sleek office, her red lipstick stark against her smirk, Victor's cold eyes glinting as they discussed faking Marvin's signature. "Elliot's getting too close," Sylvia said in the video, her voice sharp. "If he keeps digging, we cut him out." Ava froze her breath, catching. Elliot wasn't part of their plan. He was a threat to it. The emails hadn't been proof of his betrayal. They'd been Victor's attempt to control him. "Damn," Jada said, leaning over Ava's shoulder, her braids brushing the tablet. "Your boy's been playing double agent. You owe him an apology, girl." Ava's chest tightened, guilt and relief warring inside her. "If I see him again," she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. She'd pushed Elliot away, called him a liar when he'd been fighting for her all along. The thought of facing him, of admitting she'd been wrong, made her stomach twist. But first, she had a summit to crash. The night of the summit, U Street was electric, the conference hall packed with suits and artists, the air humming with anticipation. Ava stood backstage, her silk dress shimmering under the lights, her curls pinned loose, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. Lila and Jada flanked her, their eyes fierce, while Rico waited in the wings, ready to cue the video. But a new threat had emerged. Sylvia had hired a hacker to wipe Ava's evidence, a last-ditch move to protect her claim. Rico's tech guy was racing to recover the files, but time was running out. As Ava stepped to the podium, the crowd's chatter faded, eyes turning to her. Sylvia sat in the front row, her black dress elegant, her smile a blade. Victor Kane was beside her, his silver hair gleaming, his presence a reminder of the empire Ava was up against. She gripped the microphone, her voice clear, cutting through the room like a knife. "Coleman's Soul Studio is my father's legacy, my mother's dream," she said, her eyes locking on Sylvia's. "But Sylvia Ward forged his signature to steal it, and I have proof." The crowd gasped, whispers rippling, but Sylvia's smile didn't falter. Ava nodded to Rico, and the screen behind her flickered, then went black. The hacker had struck. Panic clawed at Ava's throat, but Rico sprinted to the tech booth, his voice crackling through her earpiece. "Give me 30 seconds. Ava. Stall." She took a breath, her voice steady despite the chaos. Sylvia thought she could erase the truth, she said, stepping forward, her heels clicking on the stage. "But you can't erase a legacy. Coleman's Soul isn't just a studio. It's Kirkwood's heart, Oakland's rhythm, DC's pulse, and we won't let it die." The crowd roared, artists standing, clapping their energy, a wave that lifted her. Sylvia's smile slipped, her eyes darting to Victor, who leaned forward, his face a mask of fury. Then the screen flared to life, the video playing Sylvia and Victor's voices damning them, their words a confession of forgery and greed. The room erupted shouts of outrage, drowning out Sylvia's protests. Ava's heart pounded, triumph surging, but her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for one face. Elliot Kane stepped from the shadows, his black suit sharp, his gray eyes locked on her. He climbed the stage, ignoring the chaos, and handed her a tablet. "More evidence," he said, his voice low, urgent. "I hired a hacker to pull Victor's private files, bank transfers, emails, everything." Sylvia's finished. Ava stared at him, her breath catching. "You did this?" she whispered, her voice trembling, not with anger, but with something softer, deeper. "For you," he said, his eyes burning into hers, raw and unguarded. "I told you, Ava. I'm on your side." The crowd was still shouting. Sylvia's face pale as security moved toward her, but Ava barely noticed. She nodded to Rico, who uploaded Elliot's files, the screen flashing with proof of Victor's payments to Sylvia, their plan to gut Black studios across 3 cities. The summit's board, stunned, voted on the spot. Sylvia was stripped of her claim. Coleman's Soul Studio returned to Ava. Victor stood, his glare icy, but he walked out, his empire crumbling. Ava turned to Elliot, her voice barely a whisper. "Why?" He stepped closer, his hand brushing her arm. His touch, electric, even now. "Because I love you," he said, simple, raw, like a truth he'd fought to admit. "And I'm done letting my father's sins hurt you." Her heart stopped the world, narrowing to his eyes, his breath, the heat of his hand. She wanted to speak, to fight, but the crowd's cheers pulled her back, the moment slipping away. Sylvia was gone, escorted out, her legacy in ruins. But Ava's fight wasn't over, not until she faced the man who'd just laid his heart bare after the summit. Ava needed air, needed space to breathe. She slipped out, Jada and Lila promising to handle the press, and found herself on a rooftop bar overlooking U Street. The city sparkled below a mosaic of lights and shadows, the distant thump of go-go music rising from a club. The air was cool, scented with jasmine and the faint tang of asphalt, the bass vibrating through the concrete. Ava leaned against the railing, her silk dress catching the breeze, her curls loose, her mind a storm of grief, triumph, and Elliot's words. "I love you." Footsteps sounded behind her, deliberate, familiar. She didn't turn, but her pulse kicked up as Elliot stopped beside her, his cedar cologne cutting through the night. "You were incredible tonight," he said, his voice low, warm like a fire on a cold night. "You saved it all." "Ava." She glanced at him, his shirt sleeves rolled up his tie, gone his eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "I had help," she said, her voice quiet, her fingers tightening on the railing. "You didn't have to do that." Elliot risked everything. He stepped closer, his shoulder brushing hers, the city lights glinting in his eyes. "Yeah, I did," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I was wrong about a lot of things, my father, the company, even myself. But not about you. Never about you." Her breath hitched his words, unraveling her defenses. She turned to face him, the rooftop shrinking to just them, the go-go bass, a pulse in her veins. "I pushed you away," she said, her voice trembling raw. "I thought you were one of them. I'm sorry." He shook his head, his hand lifting to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek, warm against her skin. "Don't," he said, his voice a whisper. "You fought for what mattered, and I'm fighting for you." The bass swelled, a go-go track kicking in fast and primal, the rhythm pulling them together. Ava stepped into his arms, her hands sliding up his chest, feeling the heat through his shirt. They moved a slow, sultry dance, her hips swaying to the beat, his hands gripping her waist, the silk of her dress slick under his palms. The city lights pulsed red and gold, catching the sweat on her neck, the flecks of his jaw. She tilted her head, her lips brushing his ear, her voice a husky dare. "You sure you can handle me, Kane?" He growled low and deep, pulling her closer, his thigh pressing against hers. "Try me, Brooks," he said, his lips grazing her jaw, sending a shiver down her spine. The bass thumped her heart racing, and she kissed him fierce and hungry, her nails digging into his shoulders, his hands sliding to her hips, gripping hard. The rooftops spun the music a living thing, their breaths mingling hot and ragged, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope. Her dress rode up his fingers, brushing bare skin, and she gasped, the sound swallowed by his kiss, the go-go rhythm driving them higher. But she pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, her chest heaving, her lips swollen. "This is real, right?" she whispered, her voice raw, vulnerable. "You and me?" He held her gaze, his hand cradling her face, his voice steady. "Real as it gets, Ava. I'm yours." She smiled a real smile, the first in weeks, and kissed him again, softer this time, a promise sealed under the DC sky. The bass faded, the city hummed, and for the first time, Ava felt like she wasn't just fighting, she was living. But the victory wasn't complete. Back at the hotel, Lila handed Ava a new file, her face grim. "Rico's tech guy found this," she said, her voice low. "Sylvia's hacker didn't just try to wipe your evidence. They sent a copy to someone else, someone big outside Kane." "Media?" Ava's stomach dropped, the rooftop's warmth fading. "Who?" she asked, her voice tight. Lila shook her head. "We don't know yet, but Sylvia's not done. Ava, and neither is whoever's pulling her strings." Ava glanced at Elliot standing by the window, his eyes on the city below. He'd given up everything, his company, his father's legacy for her. But the fight wasn't over, and the shadows were closing in. She clutched the file, her resolve hardening. Sylvia had taken her father, but she wouldn't take her future. Not with Elliot by her side, and not with U Street's rhythm in her blood. U Street was a symphony of light and sound, its pulse never slowing even as dawn crept over Washington, D.C. The Black Broadway glowed with neon jazz clubs, go-go drummers pounding rhythms on street corners, and murals that told stories of triumph and struggle. The air carried the sweet heat of mambo sauce, the tang of fried fish, and the faint jasmine of late-blooming flowers along the Potomac. Ava Brooks stood on the edge of it all, her leather jacket slung over a silk dress, her curls catching the morning light. She'd won back Coleman Soul Studio, exposed Sylvia Ward's forgery, and shattered Victor Kane's empire at the National Music Summit, but the victory felt fragile, shadowed by a new threat. A mysterious figure who'd received Sylvia's hacked evidence, someone still pulling strings from the dark. Elliot Kane was by her side, his gray eyes softer now, his suit traded for a black sweater that hugged his frame. He'd given up Kane Media, his father's legacy to fight for her, and his confession on the rooftop. "I love you still," echoed in her heart. Their kiss under U Street's lights had sealed something real, something worth fighting for. But Ava knew the war wasn't over. Sylvia was down, but not out, and the anonymous threat loomed like a storm on the horizon. For now, though, she had a legacy to rebuild, a love to nurture, and a community to honor. Ava's first move was a concert, a tribute to her father, Marvin Brooks, and her mother Lena, whose soul records had built Coleman Soul Studio. She chose an outdoor stage on U Street, its concrete platform framed by murals of go-go legends and jazz icons. The event was more than a show. It was a declaration that black music, black culture would not be erased. Jada Miles, Lila Carter, and Rico Torres rallied beside her, turning the concert into a celebration of Kirkwood, West Oakland, and DC's unbreakable spirit. Ava stood backstage, her tablet buzzing with logistics, her eyes scanning the growing crowd. Musicians, activists, neighbors, all united under the autumn sun. Jada, her braids swinging, bumped Ava's shoulder, her grin wide. "Look at this girl. You did this." Marvin's smiling somewhere. "I know it." Ava's throat tightened, her fingers brushing the vinyl necklace she wore, a piece of Lena's favorite record encased in resin. Hope, so she said, her voice soft. "But we're not done yet. Sylvia's still out there in that hacker's file." "Chill." Jada cut in, her eyes fierce. "You got us. You got him." She nodded toward Elliot, who was helping Rico set up speakers, his sleeves rolled up, sweat glinting on his brow. "Man gave up an empire for you. That's some real shit." Ava's lips curved, a warmth spreading in her chest. "Yeah," she said, her eyes lingering on Elliot. "Real as it gets." The concert kicked off at dusk, the stage bathed in golden light, the crowd a sea of raised hands and swaying bodies. Rico's go-go band took the stage, their congas and cowbells driving a rhythm that shook the ground. Lila's graffiti art, projected on screens, told the story of Coleman's soul. Marvin's guitar, Lena's voice, Ava's fight. Jada performed a hip-hop set, her rhymes sharp, calling out gentrification and greed, the crowd roaring her name. But the real moment came when Ava stepped up, her silk dress, shimmering her curls loose under the lights. She held a microphone, her voice steady, raw. "This is for my parents," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd, finding Elliot's, his gaze a lifeline. "For Kirkwood, Oakland, D.C., for every soul that fought to be heard." She sang a soul ballad, Lena's favorite, her voice soaring, breaking, then rising again. The crowd swayed, some crying, others cheering the music. A bridge between past and future. Elliot joined her on stage, his fingers brushing hers, and played a piano riff, simple but haunting, a tribute to Marvin. Their eyes locked, the music weaving them together, and for a moment, the world was just them, fire and soul, burning eternal. But Sylvia wasn't done. Hours before the concert, Ava had received a text from an unknown number. "Check the news. Your studio's done." A local blog bought by Sylvia's allies had posted a smear claiming Coleman's soul was bankrupt. Its victory at the summit, a fraud. The lies spread fast, threatening to sour the concert's triumph. Ava, Rico, and Lila worked backstage, tracing the blog to Sylvia's hacker, a DC insider with ties to Victor's old network. Rico's tech guy shut down the site, and Jada took to social media, rallying U Street's community to drown out the noise with posts of support. By the time Ava sang, the smear was fading, the crowd's love louder than any lie. Sylvia's final blow came after the concert as Ava and her crew celebrated at a U Street carryout, the air thick with the smell of mac and cheese and sweet tea. A courier delivered a package, a legal notice from Sylvia claiming a new document, supposedly Marvin's will naming her sole heir. Ava's hand shook as she read it, the paper trembling in the neon glow. "She's desperate," Lila said, her voice hard. "This is another fake." Rico nodded, his dread swaying. "We've got the summit evidence. Courts won't buy this, but she's got someone backing her, Ava. Someone with cash." Ava's eyes met Elliot's, his face grim. "Victor," he said, his voice low. "He's out of Kane Media, but he's not out of moves. I'll find him." She nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. Sylvia and Victor were shadows, but you. Street's light was stronger, and so was she. The wedding came a month later, a U Street celebration that shut down the block. Ava and Elliot had burned the marriage contract in a quiet moment. Its ashes scattered in the Potomac, their love no longer bound by paper. They chose a rooftop venue, its concrete deck strung with fairy lights, murals of go-go drummers glowing in the background. The air was warm, scented with soul food, fried catfish, collard greens, cornbread, and the go-go band played a rhythm that made the crowd dance before the vows. Ava wore a silk gown, white but bold. It slit high, her curls crowned with a gold chain. Elliot, in a tailored black suit, looked like he'd stepped out of a dream, his gray eyes soft only for her. Jada, Leela, and Rico stood as their crew, Jada's hip-hop freestyle kicking off the ceremony, Lila's graffiti art on the programs, Rico's go-go beats, setting the vibe. The preacher, a U Street legend, called them forward, his voice warm. Elliot Kane, do you take Ava Brooks to love to fight for, to dance with through every storm? Elliot's hand squeezed hers, his voice steady. Raw, I do. Always. The crowd cheered, but Ava's eyes were on him, her smile sly. Ava Brooks, the preacher, said, do you take Elliot Kane to challenge, to cherish, to keep him on his toes? She laughed, her voice clear. Hell yeah, I do. She leaned in, whispering so only he heard. But don't think this means you're off the hook for go-go lessons. He grinned, a rare full smile that lit her up. Deal, Brooks. They kissed before the preacher could finish, her hands cupping his face, his arms pulling her close, the crowd roaring, the go-go bass thumping like their hearts. The fairy lights twinkled, the murals glowed, and U Street sang for them. The reception was a party for the ages, go-go dancers, soul food platters, and a dance floor that never emptied. Ava and Elliot led a go-go line, her hips swaying his hands on her waist. Their laughter blending with the music, Jada toasted them with a rap. Lila sprayed a mural of their initials, and Rico spun a set that kept the block alive till dawn. But the real moment came later, when they slipped away, stealing a quiet escape. The penthouse overlooked the Potomac, its glass walls framing the river's silver shimmer. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, casting Ava in a soft glow, her silk gown pooling on the floor as she stepped out of it, leaving her in a slip that clung to her curves. Elliot shut the door, his suit jacket gone, his shirt unbuttoned, his eyes locked on her. The air was warm, scented with jasmine from an open window, the distant rush of the river, a soft lullaby. Ava turned, her curls falling over one shoulder, her skin catching the moonlight like polished bronze. So, husband, she said, her voice husky, teasing. What now? Elliot crossed the room, his steps deliberate, his hands finding her waist, the silk cool under his palms. Now, he said, his voice low, rough, I show you what forever feels like. He kissed her slow and deep, his lips tracing hers, his tongue teasing a dance as intimate as their wedding vows. Her hands slid up his chest, nails grazing his skin, feeling the heat beneath his shirt. The moonlight shifted shadows playing across their bodies, the river's hum blending with their breaths, soft, then sharp, a rhythm building rhythm. His fingers traced her spine, the slip slipping lower, her skin electric under his touch. She gasped, her head tilting back, his lips finding her neck, her pulse racing under his kiss. Elliot, she whispered, her voice a melody, her hands pulling him closer, their bodies pressed tight, the penthouse fading to just them. The curtains swayed, the moonlight danced, and the world was theirs, a fire that would never burn out. The scene softened, the curtains falling closed, their love, a private symphony, eternal and unbroken. The next morning, Ava woke to sunlight, Elliot's arm around her, the Potomac sparkling outside. A letter had arrived, slipped under the door, its handwriting sharp, unfamiliar. You haven't won, Brooks. Lena's secrets are still out there. Ava's heart skipped the name of her mother. A jolt, Sylvia was gone. Victor disgraced. But someone else was watching, someone tied to Lena's past. She glanced at Elliot, still asleep, his face peaceful, and slipped the letter into her bag. They'd face this together, but not today. Today was for love, for U Street, for the fire they'd built. Ava stood her resolve, aflame, her heart full. She'd lost her father, her trust, but she'd gained a family. Jada, Lila Rico, and Elliot, her partner in every fight. Coleman's soul would rise, U Street would sing, and their love would burn forever. Whatever shadows came, Ava Brooks was ready, forged in fire, unstoppable. What's good? Soul Stories, fam. Did Ava and Elliot's go-go love light up your soul? DC's vibin', and their fire's eternal. Hit subscribe, share your fave U Street moment in the comments, and tell us where you're groovin'. Let's keep the beat alive.